Brandon Thurston from Wrestlenomics is up next, and we're going to follow Brandon with John Pollock from Post Wrestling.
Delivering on the returns, increasing our margins.
Ratings go down the toilet if I'm not here.
All I do is simply put the math in my favor.
We agree that Brandon and John do good work.
The reason is simple wrestling economics.
I've been told the Netflix numbers. I've been told the metrics a little bit, probably 5 different times. I still don't get it.
There were respectable wrestling journalists who needed answers.
Thank you very much, members of the media. I hope you all go to hell.
How about we pop a number right here, right now?
Whole part of the show, man.
Here we are with another edition of Pollock and Thurston. It is John Pollock, joined as always by Brandon Thurston, and we are in the throes of a polar vortex here in Toronto. We are here in the aftermath of some 50 some odd centimeters of snow that descended upon Toronto. WWE not batting, not even blinking as they roared into town and put 15,000 people in the Scotiabank Arena despite all of this snow. How are you doing, Brandon?
It's terrible out there. It's not snowing at the moment. It's very cold. It's very cold in my home at this time. And I had to park like around the corner, like 2 blocks away, because there are parking spots available, but some of them are just buried in several inches. I use inches here in the United States of snow, and it's bad.
Yeah, my car was there was just the outline of a vehicle that I presumed for 2 days my vehicle was underneath this snow. Like literally could not see any of it. I had to use a shovel to uncover my car. So it is still there. I can report back. But we have a big show coming up for you. Boy, a lot to tackle on this show. Let us just say that, Brandon, we've been doing this show, about 3 years now. But this was
I think early 2023 is when we started.
And you know what? When you and I sat down, we said, I think we can do something great here. We can make some magic. And I remember Brandon saying, John, it's all well and good that we do this weekly show, but we haven't truly made it until we have been cited in a McMahon filed complaint. And we finally made it over the past week. The podcast of choice when it comes to representation for one Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
Do you think that we are on his favorites list? Do you think that he is downloading the weekly editions of Pollock and Thurston, listening to our insight?
One can only hope. But his attorneys are listening, I guess. It's not just a footnote. And we did have I pointed out to you there was some lawsuit recently. Jack Wannen's report and post. What was that about? Remind me.
I do remember seeing this, and I can't remember what the case was. I think that was the class action. Was that the class action against WWE?
That's the class action ESPN app lawsuit. But yes, this is we are mentioned in the main text, yes, of the Ringboy latest filing.
Yeah, we'll get to that later on because Vince and Linda McMahon have filed their oppositions to the continued pseudonyms being utilized by the Ring Boys. We'll go through both of their oppositions a little later on. We're also going to talk about week 2 of TNA Impact on AMC. How well did their audience hold up the week after that roaring success that was week 1 on their new broadcaster? We'll talk a little bit about Triller. What a trilling 10K that they finally released. I mean, better late than never. They are now caught up to the end of 2024, so we only have a year more to go until Triller is up to date on their filings.
Yeah, I suppose we'll get if they continue to get up to date, maybe there'll be we have now our 2023 and 2024 numbers that have inspired some creative math experiments I've heard. But we do have that information. Maybe we'll get the 2025 data eventually as well. As
I always say with publicly traded companies, always best when your filings are at least up to the current U.S. administration. That's always a good rule, right?
Yeah, if you want people to be able to buy your stock, yes.
But we are going to be starting off with what other than the WWE's return to Saudi Arabia.
Less than a month ago, in a parking lot in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, WWE started building a stadium for this Saturday's Royal Rumble. And this is what it looks like today. Riyadh Season Stadium at KFD. The King Abdullah Financial District is the backdrop for the Royal Rumble this Saturday.
Those were the words that opened up Monday Night Raw this past week. That even caught your attention, Brandon. And this was.
I even went back. I pulled up Netflix. Like, where on the broadcast was that? Because I watched like I scanned through the first 15 minutes or so. Eventually,
this was literally the first thing. This was the first thing right off the opening signature.
I could not find it, but that could be a me problem. I don't know.
Okay. I grabbed this right off of Netflix just now, so
okay.
It is still there.
So it is. Okay.
But there, the sounds of Lincoln Park that take us into the Royal Rumble this Saturday in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I am surprised they didn't go with the average Royal Rumble as the title. This is a 30-man Rumble that we're going to see, 2 of them. But this can't be the greatest, right? By pure volume,
the typical Royal Rumble.
The typical Royal Rumble. I think that
which is I think better. I mean, I would think probably not a typical payment for this. Maybe the greatest payment, in fact, for this event.
Why don't they just call it as such? The greatest Royal Rumble payment. Yes, there is. That is worth looking at because this year they will be having 3 shows in Saudi Arabia. And it does beg the question, like, is this, it's just the going rate of a roughly $50 million fee? Does the Royal Rumble bring with it any additional cost? Like, does it set Saudi Arabia back anymore? And how do you sit down and start that negotiation if you wanted more for the Royal Rumble? Like, you're getting $50 million. It's like, you know what, we got to go 65 for a Royal Rumble.
Well, TKO did note that they put out a press release this morning saying they are going to have their full year 2025 earnings report, I believe on February 25th.
A Wednesday night.
That will cover the fourth quarter of the year, the final quarter of the year. That won't cover this year, but maybe they'll give some guidance on what we should expect. I mean, now I know they're wrapped up with other stuff here. We got UFC as part of this business and IMG and On Location and PBR and all that. So it's not as big of a shifting of the landscape when you've got, $50 million, extra money in here. But I would be curious, if this is if this is double the typical Saudi PLE, which I could see being the case, it'd be nice to have some guidance about that. So you know what to expect in the financial, when the Q1 earnings report comes out.
Well, we wanted to focus today's discussion on the construction of this stadium that was promoted by Michael Cole on Monday. These images have been circulating throughout the month, and people have been watching this. I mean, basically on January 5th, this is pretty much the site. Like, this was just an empty land for this makeshift stadium to be built for the Royal Rumble. And within a month, with time to spare, they have crafted this large stadium that should be full on Saturday. And I think that naturally brings about the questions. And
is this where SmackDown is going to be too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. 2 nights on the stadium. You bet you might as well get your all that bang for your buck for get 2 shows out of this rather than just the one on Saturday. But yes, so we wanted to look at sort of the overall system that is in place in Saudi Arabia, because there are lots of these buildings that go up, and a natural topic that accompanies this are the workers that are employed to construct these. And Brandon, you have gone to some exceptional lengths this week. You have reached out to many entities and received a number of responses as well. So we want to give this as sort of like a primer on a lot of the actions and policies that are in place, some of the reforms that have come out over the past years, how those reforms have been viewed and received, the transparency when it comes to especially the utilization of migrant workers that are quite often the ones that are tasked with carrying out these construction projects. And Saudi Arabia is a part of the world that utilizes in excess of 13 million migrant workers. And this is under the veil of something called the kafala system. And to explain what the kafala system is, we are going to lean here on several organizations. One is walkfree.org, which is an international human rights group that is focused on the eradication of modern slavery. They define it that under the kafala system, employers and recruiters threaten migrant workers with the potential loss of their visa to keep them in poor working conditions. Some migrant workers in Saudi Arabia are forced to continue working past the end of their contracts when their employers refuse to grant exit permission or pay the exit fee. Workers who do leave risk being reported for the crime of absconding, leaving them undocumented and vulnerable to arrest, detention, often for extended periods of time in overcrowded and unsanitary conditions, and deportation from Saudi Arabia. And so a lot of these workers, like these grants are handed out, and it is private companies that will enlist workers from neighboring countries that will come in, and it is under this visa system that for a significant period of its history, they controlled these visas, and thus creating this immediate power imbalance that you have over your workforce that are put into these dehumanizing conditions at times when you look at the conditions of which they're working under. And some of the pushback to this has led to several reforms over the years, going back to 2020 when they were introduced. But this is still something that is at odds with a lot of these watchdog groups that are still paying attention and speaking to people on the ground that are still going through these systems, and how transparent the reforms are actually being reported and what actions are being put to actual execution.
And so I understand that, at least according to the government, that they have abolished the system, but nonetheless, we've learned a lot of information here. We've read a lot of information about why there are still concerns. What I guess what I want to lay out is that it seems very likely that there are migrant workers who were involved in this construction project. We have reached out to, I'll detail later at least, everybody that I've sent messages to, including WWE, who may or may not be directly involved in how this was built. It seems very likely, that migrant workers were involved in the building of this stadium, which was built extraordinarily fast. Because migrant workers are so heavily involved in construction in Saudi Arabia. And we've got a lot of track record and a lot of reports and a lot of research to say that migrant workers are often experience exploitive conditions. We don't have any evidence that the workers who were involved in the building of this stadium were abused or exploited, but it's a reasonable question to ask. And I've sent a lot of messages to different parts of the government, different entities and parties who may know anything, and we haven't gotten any response yet from any of those parties. What we do have are a few comments from human rights organizations.
That's right. And we can get into a lot of the specifics when it comes to these reforms, but I do want to lean on some of these people that did get back to you. If you want to pull up any of these slides as well, we can lean on these. The first one we'll go to is Catriona Fraser, who is with the migrant worker. She's a migrant workers researcher at the Business and Human Rights Center. And she responded stating that migrant workers in Saudi Arabia face severe human rights risks, particularly in construction, where tight project deadlines, high levels of subcontracting, and pay-when-paid policies drive down working conditions. Alarmingly, Saudi Arabia was one of the countries where we recorded the highest number of allegations of abuse impacting migrant construction workers in 2025, with workers dying at work, experiencing months of wage theft, paying extortionate recruitment fees, and returning home with kidney failure after working in extreme heat. As the country diversifies its economy and hosts major sporting events, companies gaining lucrative contracts must be alert to these heightened risks and conduct effective human rights due diligence to ensure the rights of migrants building these projects that are respected. And, this goes just like WWE would certainly be in under that umbrella of sporting events that are benefiting it potentially from the utilization of these migrant workers. but I mean, this extends to boxing. There is a massive need for construction when it comes to the 2034 World Cup that FIFA has faced a lot of criticism regarding when they awarded the bid to Saudi Arabia as well. So, and this comes at a time when the Public Investment Fund is putting so much into this. In fact, just yesterday, they announced that they were halting construction on this 1,300-foot building that was going to be the largest in the world to rededicate and focus their finances towards all of these projects regarding the World Cup in 2034 as well. Like, this is this giant upheaval where there's all these construction projects, specifically in Riyadh, but extending beyond that as well, that is being funded through the Public Investment Fund.
Yeah. Do they officially have the World Cup now?
Yes, in 2034.
Yeah. And I believe there was concern when Qatar had the World Cup several years ago as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
Another person that responded to us was Abdullah Al-Jurawi, who is with the monitoring. He is a monitoring and campaigns officer at ALQST. And his response was that large-scale construction projects in Saudi Arabia rely heavily on low-wage migrant workers under the kafala system who often endure extremely long hours in unsafe conditions. Workers who demand their overdue wages or request better conditions risk arrest, detention, and even deportation. These projects also have a severe impact on the environment and local communities. So those were comments that were directly in response to some of our inquiries over the past couple of days. So I mentioned these reforms, and this comes, Amnesty International had just put out this report back in November that was assessing this exact topic and specific to these reforms that, again, were introduced, and there had been a pushback towards some of these working conditions. And from their report, it states that despite limited reforms introduced since 2021, Saudi Arabia's kafala sponsorship system remains largely intact, continuing to govern the lives of over 13.4 million migrant workers. The system binds foreign workers to their employer, who acts as their official sponsor from the moment they enter the country and throughout their employment. To enter and be able to work in the country, migrant workers still need their employer to sponsor their visa and issue and renew their residence permit. Employees can retain excessive control over workers' legal status, job mobility, and ability to leave the country, making them highly vulnerable to abuse, exploitation, and forced labor. It effectively absolves the state of responsibility for protecting workers' rights and reinforces a deeply unequal power dynamic. These ongoing abuses have prompted international scrutiny and action. This specifically mentions a global trade union that filed a complaint to the International Labor Organization accusing Saudi Arabia of violating conventions on forced labor, wage theft, and freedom of association. Saudi Arabia enforces highly repressive policies that restrict freedom of expression, association, and assembly, preventing migrant workers from forming or joining trade unions or engaging in collective bargaining to improve their conditions. So while it states that they have introduced several reforms and some mobility has been introduced, it is still a case where these are still very repressive conditions. And overall, the take I get is that still you have these employers that they hold the power of your visa, and you are very much de-incentivized from pushing back towards any of these conditions because they largely are in control of your visa, much less your employment as well in the country. And that still appears to be at odds. And this is a report where they have spoken specifically with dozens of people that were right there on the ground as workers in Saudi Arabia as well.
And to describe what the circumstances, what I understand it from reading, leading up to what we're going to talk about today, is you have a lot of people who live in other countries, including, I understand it in Saudi Arabia, it's largely people who live in Bangladesh, India, the Philippines, Nepal. They're in pretty dire economic circumstances, or they're in bad circumstances for other reasons, and they view taking the sponsorship to go to Saudi Arabia, for example, and do work as it's a better economic opportunity than where they're at right now. So they can make money and save, or they send money back to their families, and they work for it's usually not intended to be permanent. I understand you work there for a time for a contract,
Yes.
and then you're eventually going to go back home. But they're under a lot of control from their employer because of that sponsorship system.
That's right. Like you come over and it's a period of time that you are going to be working on these given projects, but a lot of that sometimes can be at the behest of the employer. Like you don't necessarily know how long you're going to be there. And part of what prompted this Amnesty International report is that they just completed this major project for the Riyadh Metro project that lasted 11 years and just opened up last year. And it specifically notes here that the long hours workers spent on the Riyadh Metro project were often intensified by the unrelenting heat of Saudi Arabia's summers. Between June and August of both 2024 and 2025, for example, Riyadh stayed at 40 Celsius or higher for more than 8 days each. Similar temperatures grip much of the country each year as Saudi Arabia continues experiencing a rise in both the frequency and intensity of its hot days. Although most interviewees said their employers largely abided by the government's summer ban on outdoor work in direct sunlight during the midday hours, they also painted a picture of its shortcomings, particularly as heat and humidity can remain at startling levels beyond these hours and months. One construction worker likened the struggle of laboring in the sweltering hours outside the ban to being in, quote, hell. Several interviewees recounted sweat soaking their clothes, eyes stinging, vision blurring, and colleagues collapsing either on site or later while eating dinner in the workers' canteen, all signs of the serious dangers of prolonged exposure in the extreme heat. Some workers also described facing pressure from their superiors who would prevent them from taking breaks or penalizing those who did so without permission in breach of government guidance on work in the heat. Saudi Arabia's laws and policies include important measures to safeguard workers from the harmful effects of prolonged heat exposure. However, by failing to take a risk-based approach, they remain inadequate to mitigate against the serious health risks faced by outdoor migrant workers. These shortcomings constitute a violation of the right to safe and healthy working conditions under international law and standards. So, again, it is like this is generally like the norm for a lot of these major projects or very quick turnaround projects that just the feasibility of completing these projects requires the use of migrant workers. So it would be very outside of the norm if this were not the case for the stadium, but we don't want to make this so specific to the...
We should mention too, in Riyadh right now, it's 19 Celsius, which is 67 Fahrenheit, which sounds pretty good to me from where I am. But yeah, it's at least it's not in the hundreds in January in Riyadh.
That's right. So other notes worth pointing out here is the fact that this is something that I feel like you as the consumer, like, do you have an attachment to care about such an issue like this? And I think this extends to the broader topic of Saudi Arabia that I think we're kind of a broken record on that seems to lessen and lessen with each passing event. And I think it does come down to that question of you ultimately as a consumer of this entertainment, like, do you care about the underbelly or asking these types of questions as it relates to your form of entertainment that you are taking in? Many people are going to watch the Royal Rumble. They're going to enjoy the show on Saturday. And without question, there is, just based on that way that they opened up Raw, I think they will make this a tremendous physical achievement that they built this stadium in such quick time that will be recognized on the broadcast itself. And if that's how you are going to consume the product on Saturday, you're more than willing to do so. But I think these are still relevant questions that one should be asking about what is the most financially lucrative shows that this company enjoys on its calendar. These are more lucrative than your WrestleManias. These are without question, like, Saudi Arabia will produce the most quote-unquote live event revenue of the year, and it has nothing to do with ticket sales.
And this is a relationship with a government. This is not the same as, there's a lot of problems in the United States, right? But they're
Which is often the qualifier that many are having a harder time casting aspersions overseas when what is happening domestically. But that is a caveat. The UFC, you can definitely have a more like-to-like comparison there, but that is not the case. The WWE is not running government-sponsored shows in the United States, and I think that is an important qualifier.
It's somewhat comparable when UFC will do a show on the White House lawn. But this is we're in what I think year 8 or so of a 10-year relationship with the government that may extend beyond that. We'll see. And they're getting, for the typical PLEs, $50 million, maybe looks like maybe even a little more with interest. And they're getting at least $50 million for this event directly from the government. And I'm sure there's a lot of fans in Saudi Arabia, citizens of Saudi Arabia, who are really excited about this. And it's not about that. I'm sure they're going to have a lot of them are going to have a great time at the event. But this is a relationship between a government that is responsible for things like this, treatment of migrant workers and a lot of other human rights issues, which makes it much different than any other WWE event that WWE does anywhere else in the world, where they don't get $50 million directly from a government. They get ticket sales revenue from fans who buy tickets in addition to whatever business deals they have beyond that.
And we did see when tickets went on sale for this event, like there was a gigantic demand based on the people that were in the queue to buy tickets for the Royal Rumble. Like this event, this will be full. But it is interesting to look at, if this event were to be taking place in the United States, what you can imagine ticket prices would top out at. I mean, we are talking about a gigantic level of ticket pricing by TKO for these WWE shows. If you were to go to Saudi Arabia, and this is based off of buying directly off of the site where you can buy tickets to this, tickets start out at the equivalent of $21.33 US. And for VIP tickets, the very, very important people, $400 US. That is the top end price to go to the Royal Rumble, which is a fraction of what these would cost in the US as well. So you can
Google
also
tells me that the median income for the median person in a month in Saudi Arabia is $2,835, which doesn't sound too much different from the United States on a monthly basis. But yes.
So I think it is also worth noting here. Again, this is from walkfree.org, and regarding how Saudi Arabia is combating modern slavery, it states here that Saudi Arabia is among countries taking the most action to respond to modern slavery in the Arab states region. However, this performance did not translate at the global level, with no Arab states countries demonstrating among the strongest responses. Since 2018, Saudi Arabia has made notable improvements in its efforts to support survivors to exit and remain out of slavery. For example, Saudi Arabia launched an awareness campaign on how to identify and report modern slavery, and in March of 2020 launched a new national referral mechanism to handle and refer trafficking cases. Saudi Arabia also joined Bahrain as the only other country in the region to distribute national victim identification guidelines to all first responders. However, government shelters to support survivors reportedly only accept female domestic workers, and trafficking victims may be left at embassies rather than referred to shelters. In 2021, all 105 victims identified and referred to services by NGOs were female. Reports indicate some victims were detained and deported for immigration violations rather than being identified and supported. So it is not to say that there are not meaningful changes that are being introduced, but at least according to Amnesty International, it has been very hard to get a transparent view of what is on paper and what is actually being carried out, and a power imbalance that still does exist. And in a country that, while there is a lot of discussion points about how Saudi Arabia is improving its human rights record, we are coming off 2 record-setting years when it comes to executions in Saudi Arabia as well, which have skyrocketed compared to years prior by significant margins in comparison in what the figures reflect for 2024 and 2025.
Yes. And we did get a comment from Amnesty International just as we were going to air here too. And, we only have comments from these organizations that look after human rights worldwide and in this country. I wish we had some response from people in the government or people who are in charge of this project. I did ask a number of these organizations who's in charge of this construction project, so we could try to reach out to them. So I did send requests for comment to all these organizations that people who are watching in video can see on the screen. So it's the General Entertainment Authority, the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Development, which is a government organization, the Royal Commission for Riyadh City, the Riyadh Municipality, the Saudi Embassy in the U.S., the Philippine Embassy in Saudi Arabia, the Migrant Workers Office of Eastern Region Operations in Saudi Arabia, the Migrant Workers Office in Riyadh, the Saudi Human Rights Commission, and WWE and TKO as well. And none of those organizations responded. Some of them did refer me to others, but they didn't respond with any meaningful information that can help our understanding of this.
And as Brandon mentioned, we did hear from Ella Knight, who is with Amnesty International USA, and she responded to us that in Saudi Arabia, migrant workers, including construction workers, building these kinds of projects, which Brandon did specifically note, like the event that we are focused on, continue to be subjected to systemic human rights abuses such as wage theft, excessive working hours, appalling living conditions, and hazardous working environments, including work in the searing heat. Underpinning such abuse is the kafala sponsorship system, which continues to severely limit foreign workers' ability to change jobs and leave the country freely. Despite changes in recent years, the system leaves them heavily dependent on the goodwill of their employers for their legal status and livelihoods, directly enabling forced labor practices. And goes on to mention some of the findings that we cited in their report about the Riyadh Metro project that was completed last year, and the overall construction sector that is highlighted in a lot of their findings as well. I wanted to also, this kind of does dovetail on a bit of what we had just discussed, but I thought this was worth bringing up. So Wei and I do a monthly mailbag show, and we did get this question that is coming up, and I thought it kind of fits more into this discussion. So I want to read you this, Brandon, and get some of your thoughts. This is from a user named Evan, who says, seeing the discourse surrounding the announcement of WrestleMania in Saudi Arabia and previously CM Punk going to Saudi Arabia, I wish to pose a good faith question. At what point do we think it is no longer right for us to criticize foreign governments? I ask this because I'll tell you what that point isn't. The point clearly isn't when our government rounds up people without due process and sends them to a concentration camp in El Salvador. The point clearly isn't when our government builds a concentration camp in hot Florida summer and calls it Alligator Alcatraz, and the government officials post dancing videos about it on TikTok. The point isn't when we threaten media companies to cancel their license until they fire their late-night host. Please don't feel like I'm lecturing. I'm grappling with these questions myself. I'm a staunch liberal. I was a very vocal critic of Saudi Arabia for their treatment of migrants and Jamal Khashoggi's murder for many years. But given everything that our government has done, I personally feel like I'm done criticizing anybody until we get ours in order. And I know that John recently made the point on Pollock and Thurston that Saudi Arabia is washing its image by overpaying WWE, and the American local governments giving comparatively nominal sites to WWE aren't the same. That's because the U.S. government has had a good 70-year head start on washing its image over the rest of the world. So I don't know if you have any, we kind of did address this. I do think there is a difference between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia when it comes to WWE and who it is in business with.
It's a government partnership. It's a government partnership. The events in the U.S., just about anywhere else in the world, there are some events where they're getting site fees from the local U.S. government, the local municipality. I mean, that's at best a few $1 million to promote tourism. I guess you could frame that as propaganda to some extent, but this is of a much different scale. This is $50 million twice a year. Could be a lot more for Royal Rumble. Could be a lot more for WrestleMania. And I think there's a big difference. The comparison of this is like the North Korea shows in 1995, where they went to an authoritarian government and partnered with that government and got paid a lot. I'm talking about Collision in Korea with WCW and New Japan in 1995. UFC on the White House lawn. I don't know if they're going to get paid for it, but it's kind of beside the point. But you're going to be doing something that is by default propaganda to a large extent, and that's much different than. I think it's just not the right comparison to make. You can be critical of authoritarian governments, and it's even if you live in a country that is becoming an increasingly authoritarian like government. I can't imagine one that comes to mind for me. You can still be critical of that government and then be critical of this relationship that WWE has with an authoritarian monarchy that has a history of human rights abuses, even as your own country may be devolving into having a worse human rights record.
Yeah, I'm never an advocate of just, throwing your hands in the air and saying everything's awful. Like, how can we? I think you can hold two thoughts at once, and I think you can be. Believe me, the UFC is going to, maybe not within its core fan base, they're going to receive a ton of criticism in the lead up to this White House event, which is largely like a whitewashing effort. I mean, that is what that event is going to be in June, and they will receive a lot of complaints. There has literally been reports on how ICE is specifically getting advertising towards certain entities, including in front of UFC fans for recruitment purposes. Like, that stuff is under fire, and I don't think anyone is turning a blind eye to that either. But I think at the core of this is that, again, ask yourself, why are these shows earning WWE so much? What is the value that this government sees in WWE? And ultimately, if you are going to be able to reap the rewards of this, I don't think that can also come with a, hey, it's a different country. We can't answer for the things that this government does when we are ultimately benefiting and in business with this government. And I think that, quite frankly, it's a very small amount that are still focused on these issues when it comes to Saudi Arabia. This is a deal that is not ending. It is not one that is slowing down. It is only getting bigger. They have reached a level now where, there will be some gripes that they're taking a WrestleMania there, but this is just accepted. This is where we go multiple times per year. And it's, most people are tired by this topic, but that is sort of the point of what this is designed to be, that we're playing the long game here, and this is going to be extremely lucrative for us. And I think that to just ignore all of these aspects of the deal is to kind of exploit what the exact purpose of this was from the beginning.
Right. And that whataboutism is exactly the point that is raised by, I think there's a Saudi government official who appeared on 60 Minutes a couple of years ago and raised exactly that. Well, how can you be critical of what we do? You have school shootings in your country. And we heard Jonathan Kraft of the New England Patriots, who are going to another Super Bowl. Jonathan Kraft, who's a TKO board member, who sat next to Mark Shapiro at a conference, and when the question of WWE's relationship with Saudi Arabia was brought up, he said, "Well, how can we be pro? We have to." He framed it as a cultural exchange, and how can we be critical of other places when we have our own problems? And it's a total false equivalency. You have a relationship with the government. With a government that's paying you $50 million, that's paying you essentially, we don't know what WrestleMania did last year, but it probably did somewhere in the range of $50 million in ticket sales. That's giving you a WrestleMania worth of cash every time you go there, twice a year at least. And that is a relationship with a government. WWE doesn't have such a relationship. Maybe UFC does to some extent and deserves similar scrutiny for that. But WWE doesn't have a relationship like that where it's doing a United States season and presenting a message to the rest of the world about how this country is a normal place where people can go to entertainment events and things seem pretty normal. So what's the big deal? That's exactly what the price tag of $50 million has on it, is that this event on Saturday, Royal Rumble, will be broadcast around the world on Netflix, on ESPN, and people will, it'll to an extent glorify and normalize Saudi Arabia's government.
At the end of this is a transaction. This is a business deal. And yes, you can absolutely tout the merits of a fan base that get to enjoy professional wrestling and see it in person, and that's wonderful. But believe me, if there was not this enormous price tag attached to it, these events would not be going there. They would not be going at any kind of loss or discount to put smiles on faces in this part of the world. They are doing these shows because they are being paid to bring these shows over at such a high higher than market value that no other place in the world is coming close to paying for WWE events. So your natural question is why? Is this government spending so much?
Is the government
more?
making it back on the ticket sales at the ticket prices that you just mentioned?
I can't do the sticker math off the top of my head, but let's say $400. Every single person in that venue got VIP tickets. I don't think it's coming close to $50 million.
And this could be a lot more than $50 million. We don't know. There hasn't been reporting on this, but maybe their financial reporting to the SEC will give us some hints.
So I thought it was important that we go over this. We do have to move on to several other topics. And Brandon, you're continuing to work on this. You have reached out to many, many people, do a lot of great work over the past couple of days on this topic. Vince and Linda McMahon, we move on, have both filed oppositions to the plaintiffs in the Ringboy lawsuit that was filed in 2024 regarding motions to proceed under pseudonyms and for a protective order. Vince and Linda McMahon, who are being represented separately and do acknowledge they are still married but are separated. Kudos to you as well. Like, it feels like we do have a very small Rolodex of photos of Vince and Linda McMahon in the grand scheme of things, at least modern photos. And
this was many photos of Linda now.
There are more of Linda. You're right, but
yes,
Vince.
Tons
I mean,
of Linda.
This was this feels like a more updated Vince McMahon with the the skunk hairstyle.
Yes, his new hairstyle with the white dye in the front. Well, I don't maybe this. I don't know what's dye and what's not. He's got a white hair in the front and
yeah, that's a good question. Like which
around
is
the back. But yes, I feel like you have to get images of people in their current state as much as possible, rather than we've got a lot.
I don't need to see Vince in that neck brace anymore from outside the courthouse in 1994. So in Vince's complaint, he is, I mean, largely these, while filed separately, they are very much in concert with one another. And it is important to kind of separate Vince and Linda McMahon's opposition from WWE and TKO that have not taken a position in this case. They are not filing to reveal the identities. They haven't taken a position on the matter. So this is specific to Vince and Linda McMahon. But in Vince's argument, they argue that the defendants are going to suffer extreme prejudice if the motion is granted for the plaintiffs to continue to be anonymized. It states that plaintiffs are not minors. Allowing them to proceed unnamed will affect discovery and litigation concerns. Fact gathering will be difficult and hinder the defendant's ability to mount a defense. And they are utilizing something called the James factors, which is a precedent from a case where it goes through 5 items of criteria when it comes to whether or not to reveal the name of a party. And one of those is whether the justification asserted by the requesting party is merely to avoid the annoyance and criticism that may attend any litigation or is to preserve privacy in a matter of sensitive and highly personal nature. The second is whether identification poses a risk of retaliatory physical or mental harm to the requesting party. Number 3 is if the ages of the people whose privacy of interest are sought to be protected. Number 4, whether the action is against a governmental or private party. And number 5, the risk of unfairness to the opposing party from allowing an action against it to proceed anonymously. And they use several instances regarding cases involving actor Kevin Spacey, the recent Sean Combs trial as well, of when it is prudent to give anonymity and when it is necessary that they do have their names revealed. And as we have repeated over and over, Vince and Linda McMahon do know the identities of all of these ring boys at hand, but they are not public names. And their argument is that by not being public, they get the benefit of being able to file this lawsuit. Vince and Linda McMahon their reputations are harmed in all of this. And on top of that, it is going to handicap their ability to properly defend themselves by the public not knowing these names, where potential evidence could come forward, other people related could dispute these stories and come forward, and that they are limited by this anonymity that is being preserved for the John Does.
Right. And the reference to our podcast or our interview with Greg Gutzler, one of the attorneys for the Ring Boys, maybe the main attorney for the Ring Boys in this case, they point to that to say, look, you're already benefiting in a way that we cannot, where Greg Gutzler says to us that you're going to see more people coming forward. You're going to see more people, even if they weren't abused, they're witnesses. So what they're saying there is the plaintiffs, they're anonymized, and they're able to publicize their story, which they take issue with. The defendants do, Vince and Linda do. They're able to publicize their story, and they, in fact, did. They started this case out in October 2024 with 5 former ring boy plaintiffs. They gained 3 more as a result, presumably, of this story coming to media attention. So they want to be able to, they want the public, again, as you mentioned, they know who these people are. They've known since relatively early on in this case. They did have to come to an agreement that Vince and Linda, or at least Vince, is sort of complaining about that after they made all these agreements. Anyway, they know who they are, but they want the public to know so that the public can say, "Oh, I knew such and such person at this relevant time period in the 80s or whatever," and that witness might come forward and help their case, say something presumably truthful that would help their case. So that's where they say they are prejudiced. They are facing an unfair circumstance here, and that's why, for one reason, that is the biggest reason. And it does. I mean, definitely Vince's brief here lays out an alternative. In the alternative is when you're making an argument where you know you might not get everything that you want. You propose, and in the alternative, they set forth these conditions, which I wrote about at the very end here, where they're asking for where is it? Where they're asking for, among other things, that they want the judge to say, okay, if you're going to protect their anonymity, well, then only do it for the pre-trial phase, where presumably I think what they're saying is then we want their names to be made public at trial, if it gets to that point, so that they could, question their character, question their credibility, so that they could gather information and present that at trial and cross-examine them with that information. And what else here? Pre-trial. They also want certain they want conditions removed so that they can share these identities with potential witnesses without cumbersome restrictions, and they want the plaintiffs to be restricted from making any more public statements or press releases.
Yeah, Linda's argument, it's pretty similar to Vince McMahon's. She also uses the James factors as a reasoning,
and the plaintiffs did as well.
Yes, that was brought up. I mean, they basically state that of the 5 factors, this being Vince and Linda McMahon, that there's really only one that they could cling to. The other 4 would be weighted in their favor if the judge is to rule on this. And
what would be a home run argument here is if they were still minors. Obviously, these are all grown men now, mostly in their 50s. If when it comes to minors, especially, children basically always get their anonymity protected. But yes, it's the fact that this is a sexual abuse case, that is the factor that's going to weigh heaviest for them. These are not government entities that they're suing, and Vince and Linda raised that this is a high-profile case. These are public figures. We are having our reputations damaged because of this, and their names also should be public for those reasons.
Yeah, the argument is raised as well regarding re-traumatization, that just going through with this case is like it. They're throwing. This is more in Linda's argument as well, that once they decided to participate in the case, they're already going into this, and the idea of having their names publicized shouldn't be any more traumatic than already engaging in this. And I'm somewhat paraphrasing that. She also states that in her motion here that plaintiffs allege that Mel Phillips, Pat Patterson, and or Terry Garvin abused them over the course of multiple years and in multiple states. They allege they were, quote, ring boys, that they attended events and interacted with employees. Certain plaintiffs allege they were harassed or abused in front of others. Plaintiffs presumably will contact any witnesses they believe can corroborate these allegations, but if other witnesses could refute plaintiffs' claims, plaintiffs' anonymity could prevent these witnesses from coming forward. Fairness demands that plaintiffs litigate this case under their real names. They make serious and damaging accusations accusations against Ms. McMahon, who must defend herself not only in this court, but also in the court of public opinion. As this high-profile case proceeds to discovery, one-sided anonymity would hinder fact-finding and unduly prejudice Ms. McMahon. Simply put, plaintiff's interest in anonymity does not outweigh the public's interest in openness and the prejudice that anonymity would pose. So the judge has to ultimately rule on this, and I mean they make
the issue around not being able to find witnesses because their anonymity is protected is probably their strongest point. They point to these cases, as you mentioned. There's numerous Diddy cases that they point to here, but they point to these Sean Combs cases and to the one Kevin Spacey case as cases in which the judge ruled that no, anonymity should not be protected here because of various factors. However, these are all Southern District of New York cases, which is in the Second Circuit. This is in Maryland, which is in the Fourth Circuit. So when you're in different circuits, these are the big appeals courts that oversee these lower federal district courts. These are in different circuits, so it's not binding precedent. Whereas if it was binding precedent from the same circuit, the judge would basically have to follow that precedent. But this is still not nothing. It's what's called persuasive precedent, so the judge could consider it.
So this is, as many of these cases, in the hands of the judge to at least decide upon this next step in the case.
And I mean, what do you make of WWE/TKO, who have the same attorney, not making any move here? They have not filed. This started a couple weeks ago when the plaintiffs filed a motion to continue this anonymity, and now only Vince and Linda have filed to oppose it. The deadline has passed. WWE did not make any opposition.
I think with them, I think that their strategy is that this had nothing to do with us. This was a different era. We are hands off in regards to this, and I think that they are being careful not to kind of put their thumb on the scale in any way here, that we don't want to be dragged into this where it looks like we are trying to uncover the identities of these potential victims. I think if push comes to shove, I think WWE and TKO's argument will not be to dispute that there was potential abuse that occurred, but that is completely out of our control. We had no firsthand knowledge of this. This was a different company. This is at the feet of Vince and Linda McMahon. This was their company, and we are not going to get dragged into this, and we're not going to suffer through any of the negative backlash of a case like this that has very ugly allegations, and by even opposing this, it kind of drags them into this of being lumped with Vince and Linda McMahon.
Yes. And like I said, why they in terms of fairness, I realize this is a very sensitive matter here, and you've got numerous allegations of sexual abuse of children, and while they may have, at least in the case of, I think, wanting to be able to fairly get witnesses, they do have a point there. There is this appearance of you want to unmask the identities of these men who claim horrific abuse.
I think like this is not like, you cannot go into this case and like, you need to look at this objectively if you are the judge. You cannot come into this just saying like, these are the bad guys, these are the good guys. It's like, how can we have a fair process? That is the whole purpose of this. And I think like there is a compelling argument to make that if the plaintiffs are willing to engage in this, it is going to come with a certain level of re-traumatization. And the fact is that you may be like, you're going to have to unearth some very ugly facts that are outlined in this, and your names may be attached to this. And in the interest of fairness, like a judge very well could see the McMahons having a very fair point here, and even opting to have a protective order that comes with some level of limitations if they don't outright just name the John Does at hand here. So I don't look at this as like there is one side here that makes a strong argument over the other. But I could very well see a judge looking at this and saying in the interest of fairness, these John Does, they should be named. And that is sort of a process when you are engaging in a legal dispute like this.
The plaintiff's motion framed the situation as some of these plaintiffs people who are close to them do not even know that they're claiming this, that they've maybe not even disclosed this to maybe some of their family members. So revealing their identities would present that issue.
There's no question that naming them, there will be like harm done to them. There will be harassment online. Like there's no doubt in my mind that will occur. And it is this judge's job to weigh that versus like allowing the defense to have an equal opportunity to defend themselves against some really heinous allegations that are levied against them. Like this is reputationally harming in a significant fashion toward the McMahons if they had knowledge of this and allowed it to go with their knowledge that this was happening in their company.
So if I'm reading the court rules correctly, February 6th will be the deadline for the plaintiffs. They'll have one more chance to file what's called a reply in response to the opposition. And then after that point, after February 6th, the judge at some point will make a decision.
To a less contentious legal issue, we go to Triller's latest filings. And Triller has published multiple quarterly reports, including its annual 10K, which annual in quotation marks. It's sort of when we get around to it,
it covers a year. It covers a 12-month period, okay?
It does. It does, in fact. 2024, a great year for some. We did learn of, more importantly, Brandon, I think that this does call for one of our favorite segments when it comes to Triller's 10K.
What does this mean for AEW?
Well, it means that in 2023, AEW accounted for 19% of Triller's gross revenue and 23% of its revenue in 2024. What do those percentages equal? In 2023, that would be $10.3 million that AEW contributed to Triller and $6.6 million in 2024. This came as Triller was of course, operates AEW Plus, but for many people, for many years, was the maybe easiest way to buy AEW's pay-per-views. But over time, AEW has added a lot of third-party entities where you can buy these pay-per-views from YouTube, payperview.com, Prime Video, and then this past September, adding HBO Max as well.
So I understand this has become something of a Rorschach test for people. What does this mean? We've got a number in 2023 around $10 million. Then we got another number the next year.
Oh man, Moxley isn't a draw. Should I not have voted for Moxley for the Hall of Fame? Is the Triller 10K giving me the idea that the Death Riders tanked?
But there were also additional distributors here. That joined the process. I don't think it's safe to try to make any estimates here beyond what we've got in this article, which, by the way, was written by Jason Umperser.
First published report at postwrestling.com.
Yes, published by the SEC.gov first. This 10K is out there. I don't know what this tells us other than, hey, AEW is a big customer for Triller. This is not just, so remember, Triller is Triller Group. There's a lot of other stuff under it. Triller TV is just one part of it. Now, you still, nonetheless, you got under the entire group. So not just Triller TV, the entire parent company in 2020, what is this, 4? In 2024, right? Yes, respectively. Okay, yes. In 2024, a quarter of their revenue came from AEW. Now, I think if I'm AEW, and look, this company is, maybe it's recovered. The fact that they filed these filings is a good sign for their health. Like they got, accountants and auditors together to actually file this.
It's a great sign.
Delisted from the NASDAQ. That's moving in the right direction. But if you're AEW, and if this company was in jeopardy, would AEW maybe think about buying this company or doing something to, you wouldn't want to forego that revenue unless there's a strong partnership to replace it with. This is one of your maybe your biggest, I don't know, maybe this is your biggest, international distributor if you put it all together. So
it's also probably like sizable revenue that GCW benefits from, like this deal when they took all of their deals going from like a la carte pay-per-views into just part of the Triller TV Plus streaming service as well. Like that was their big, when they launched that service, like Game Changer Wrestling was kind of the big promotion that they were able to land, and that was a big savings for people that were following GCW.
I'm sure AEW would love to be in business with Game Changer Wrestling, right?
They could change the game potentially if they take over Triller. What they are not taking over is BKFC. And so despite being the majority owner of a bare knuckle fighting championship, basically a 57% equity stake that Triller has, it stated it has lost the control over BKFC and no longer possess power to direct the activities or key decisions. This sounds like a bad storyline. And so it sounds as though they have given up the portion of, like, I guess, voting control. They still have a majority stake in the company, but that does not come with any type of decision making, and basically want BKFC to be deconsolidated from them.
So, much like we were talking about the possible ownership that WBD may have of AEW, it sounds like in this case, while Triller may own the majority of the shares, they no longer, if they ever did, maybe it sounds like they did, they no longer have the voting power to control this. And because they're not controlling it, it should not be included in their financial statements, I think is what I think they're getting at here.
Well, I'll leave that to an accountant to make sense out of. They were, as we had mentioned at the time, they were delisted by NASDAQ last month, and what essentially was the ground falling out from Triller was last April when they announced that this $14 million investment fell through, and that was pretty catastrophic for Triller not getting this investment. And it's kind of been like this stock is trading for pennies and is on shaky ground. But this was like the faintest of lights at the end of the tunnel that they filed their some of their reports as they try and get up to date. And next is 2025 for them to tackle.
Yes. We have a question that I'll try to answer here, as far as what percentage of Triller's business is Triller TV. And we'll do something really dangerous here. I'll probably put it in an SEC filing on the screen. Now, this is profitability where everybody's negative, right? This is a company that's not profitable, but it's maybe there's opportunity here. But the revenue is somewhere here. If I keep searching through, I had it up a second ago. I think it's back here, right? If I keep going back, I swear I'll find it. Oh, no, I think I lost it. Okay. It's okay. It's right here. So in 2024, they're reporting sports streaming, which I don't know if that's only Triller TV, but that's presumably it's not social media and it's not financial services, which are the other two segments. So
I think we can make a reasonable assumption that is.
So you got 4 million out of 27.5. What is that as a percentage? 4 divided by, let's call it, I'll do the actual numbers here. Okay. 4,089 divided by 27, blah, blah, blah. Okay. 15%. 15% of Triller Group.
Well,
asked and answered.
Yeah. I mean, that gives you a sense of the pie that Triller TV is occupying. We got numbers from Paramount Plus this past weekend. All of you that may have been watching UFC 324 on Saturday night, this was the launch of the Paramount era where...
I did put it on. I did turn it on the TV.
Did you? Oh, okay.
I can't say I focused on it very much, but it was on my television.
Well, if you got to see some of the ads over top of walkouts or in between what you used to hear the corners instructing their fighters in between rounds, now you get ads over top of it. I mean, and Dana was asked about all the increasing ads on the broadcast and said, "Hey, you're getting this for $8.99. Shut up," was basically the response to all of this. You got to pay for it somehow, even for those of you in Canada that are still spending $80 and you get these ads. So they put out a press release, a rare press release. Paramount Plus today announced a standout debut for UFC 324 held Saturday, January 24th, delivering nearly 5 million streaming views and over 7 million households, the platform's largest exclusive live event to date. UFC 324 also reached more homes than any other live UFC event in nearly a decade across linear, broadcast, and streaming. Source: Adobe Analytics and Nielsen Media. With distribution in the US and Latin America, viewers enjoyed seamless access to UFC 324, now made available as part of their Paramount Plus subscription without an additional pay-per-view cost.
5 million is this, that's the number that we're focusing on here. 5 million streaming views and over 7 million households. This is all US?
US and Latin America.
Okay. Hard to say what that split would be like between US and Latin America then, right? So to put this in some sort of US TV ratings context, I mean, it is not easy.
Off the top of my head, I would say maybe an 80-20 split in favor of the US. That would be my guess in all of this. I mean, overall, like these were very good numbers for.
Now, are we talking about AMA here? Are we talking about average throughout the broadcast? Or are we talking about 7 million households watched some segment of it?
We do know this does not include the prelims. This is from 9 p.m. Eastern onward, and just a live average minute audience / streaming views.
Okay.
4,960,000 if you scroll below there. Where they break it down there. So
there it is. Average minute audience, AMA. Mm-hmm. That's what we like to see.
Yeah, you've your request answered by the transparent Paramount.
All right. Well, hope they're going to do this for every UFC show now.
I'm going to make such a prediction that we will not get a press release next Monday after UFC 325, which is a very low impact show. Is my most polite that I can place it. But hey, maybe ESPN will surprise us and give us the viewing figures for the Royal Rumble, because they're going full tilt on the promotion of the Royal Rumble. They have people in studio. They've got people across all their platforms this week. They're doing a countdown show Friday morning on ESPN2. ESPN is going. This is the hardest they have pushed an event since WrestlePalooza, and maybe is more in line with what Mark Shapiro was hoping for when he recently spoke about the promotion that is significantly above the last number of PLEs on the service.
I had a college basketball game on last night on ESPN, and they did it's in the lower, it's in the what do you call it, the lower third little ticker. But then there was an ad read during the broadcast by the commentators, and there was some reminiscing about Stone Cold Steve Austin,
of course,
as I recall. Yes.
Yeah. What entrant do you think he will be in the Royal Rumble? All right, we're going to wrap up with our favorites, some television and streaming viewership. So going in order here, Raw last week on January 19th. This was the show in Belfast, Northern Ireland, with 2.5 million views, making a return to the global top 10 rankings at the number 9 position, while 6th in the U.S., 7th in Canada, among the countries where it ranked. Don't worry, Bolivia still strong. Look for your own PLE at some point. I think Crown Jewel Bolivia is going to be that's my 5-year prediction. Yes,
I'm remembering here. I've filled in some of the gaps here based on my estimates of what it did over 7 days for some of these December dates and maybe some of the November dates. But yeah, it's 2.5, basically what it was doing throughout the fall.
Anything you take just overall of like some of these afternoon shows that air on Netflix, like this is kind of past the I guess Stranger Things is still among their top 10, but we're past the gigantic wave that pretty much took up all the December inventory in those top 10. But these afternoon shows, I mean, this seems like a show that was not hindered by the fact it was airing in the afternoon live.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it. I mean, have there been others recently? The 12th was, right? But we don't know that number.
Yeah, we don't have that particular week. And the week before that was the big Stranger Things crossover with no cast members. But that was a U.S. show.
Big hit.
Huge. Have you caught up on Stranger Things yet?
Haven't watched a single episode.
Oh, I'm watching The Pit right now. I recommend. I think you'd like The Pit.
As a non-spinoff of ER.
Yeah, I take it as a spinoff of ER, but it's not officially a spinoff of ER. Okay. NXT last Tuesday did 608,000 viewers, which was down 2% from the prior week, while they did a 0.08 in the 18 to 49 demo. That was down 15%, and a 0.04 in 18 to 34. So our Programming Insider update, I am figuring out these charts. It's a pain in the ass for Collision and Impact when they're ranked so low, and when you scroll down, you don't get the headings above them. Right. Do you understand what I'm saying here?
Yes. I mean, my main takeaway is that we have demo numbers for the most recent ratings, SmackDown and Collision. We have demo ratings for, but we do not have total viewers. In fact, last Wednesday's.
How is this possible? How do we have such we have more ratings than ever for these shows? I know what 12 to 34 is doing for Impact, but I don't know viewership. Like, how's that possible?
It's cut off. I've sent an email asking, and I did not get a response. So we don't know what the total viewership was for last week's Dynamite. We don't know what the total viewership was for SmackDown or for Collision, but we do know the demos.
Yeah, Dynamite, no viewership as of right now. 0.08 in 18 to 49 and a 0.04 in 18 to 34. So those numbers, 18 to 49 and 18 to 34, were identical to NXT the night prior. And then we go to Thursday night. It is week 2 of Impact on AMC. The premiere did 173,000 viewers and a 0.04 in 18 to 49. Week 2, another live show in Albuquerque, New Mexico, 171,000 viewers, a 0.03. I would classify this as a bloody miracle that Impact stayed at this level for week 2. I was expecting just under 100,000 or lower. So I take this as a major win that pretty much your identical audience came back the next week.
I don't know what to make of it. It's like, was there just not that much of a whoa, let's check this out factor like there is for every other pro wrestling TV show debut? Or is it just that this is a relatively small audience, and when you've got smaller audiences, the week to week gets really volatile because you're dealing with a small sample?
It is a smaller sample, but I also, not for a second do I think they were doing anywhere close to this on Access TV. So I can't just say that there's this was the Impact audience. I think they definitely brought back people on the premiere, and I have to imagine that a lot of those people came back the second week, and you can attribute that to
everybody came back.
Like that.
Moose was right.
Moose was on top of things.
Moose was vindicated is the headline here.
That is how every headline should be attributed. No, I mean, you have to look at this as a success because often the pattern is week 1 does great, and then there's a precipitous fall, and it finds it's normal. So we'll see how it continues week number 3. This is the first time they have a tape show, and in true TNA fashion, if you were worried about any spoilers getting out, they made sure they were on top of it, because if you were watching last week's show on AMC Plus, the audio continued for 15
TNA
minutes.
Plus, or was it AMC Plus?
Sorry, TNA Plus. You can watch it on AMC Plus, but this issue was on TNA Plus, where it's still streaming live. The audio continued on TNA Plus for 15 minutes, where a bunch of storylines got out, including briefcase recipients, the main event for the next pay-per-view. I mean, just a wonderful TNA moment in its chronology. But hey, a great number that they did week 2. And we also got the SmackDown number for last Friday. Again, no viewership yet. A 0.22 in 18 to 49, a 0.10 in 18 to 34. They were first among cable originals, beating out the NHL on ESPN, and slightly up from last week's tape show in London, England. This was for last Friday's episode in Montreal. There you go.
Number 1 on cable still.
Yes, I mean, I think this is a Wrestlenomics t-shirt. Just this mound of ratings altogether.
Yeah, this one's, the headings are relatively well organized here. We just don't have, we have what is probably a total viewership ranking.
Yes.
But we don't have the actual total viewership number.
So they've got the rankings, but not the numbers.
That's
like, I don't think one can exist without the other. Yeah. Okay.
Well, they're definitely somewhere.
They are somewhere under it's the Pentagon Papers. All right, there you go, everyone. You're up to date on all of your television numbers, and what a show this was. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. We have got plenty coming up. I'm going to be back tonight with Wei Ting for Rewind to Dynamite. We will be chatting about the show from Cedar Park, Texas, is where Dynamite is taking place from. And then on Thursday, I'm going to be joined by Neil Flanagan on the Post Wrestling Cafe for our Double Double and Espresso members with Book Club. What are we chatting about this month? We're doing A Lion's Tale by Chris Jericho, a 2007 release discussing the early years of Chris Irvine. Brandon, what can you alert all of the viewers toward?
we're putting together all the TV ratings information we can. All the TV ratings information that is available. If we don't see a total viewership number for SmackDown or Collision soon, I will do demo-only reports, just like I did for this past week's Dynamite. But those reports include not only TV ratings, but also comparisons for attendance and usually YouTube as well.
Check out all of that at Wrestlenomics.com, patreon.com/Wrestlenomics, and you can join us, postwrestlingcafe.com. If you get in before this Sunday, you will avoid the price increase that is coming. We have warned people about the dangers of inflation. We will be introducing a price increase at our lowest level. However, if you do sign up before February 1st, you can lock in the old price for all of 2026. I mean, what a deal there. So postwrestlingcafe.com is where you can check out all of that. We're going to sign off. We're here next Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. We'll talk to you then. Goodbye.